You know, back in the 1960s, while the whole world was watching America race to the moon, the Soviet Union was up to something completely different. They were running this series of terrifying, almost unbelievable experiments on our next-door neighbor, Venus. We're talking billions of dollars, years of work, all poured into what was essentially a suicide mission to land a probe on Venus and snap the first ever pictures from another world. And what they discovered? Well, it was a vision of hell that just staggered their scientists and completely rewrote our understanding of the solar system.
But here's the big question, right? After 18 different missions, after all that sacrifice and so many incredible firsts, why did Russia just stop? Why'd they never go back? To figure that out, we have to go right back to the beginning.
So picture this. It's the peak of the Cold War. The space race isn't just about science, it's a full-on global showdown. While America was betting everything on landing a man on the moon, the Soviets aimed for something different. Something you could argue was even bolder: Venus. Their goal? It was symbolic. They wanted to prove that if America could touch the heavens, the Soviet Union could conquer hell itself.
Now, at the time, everyone kind of thought Venus was Earth's twin. I mean, they're neighbors, roughly the same size, pretty close to the sun, but there was this one massive difference. Venus was totally covered in this thick, permanent blanket of clouds. Nobody had any idea what was underneath. It was this giant mystery box floating in space, and the Soviets were absolutely determined to be the ones to rip it open.
Just think about the possibilities for a second. Yeah, landing on the moon was huge, but you can see the moon with a telescope. Unveiling the surface of a completely hidden world? That was a whole other level. I mean, what if they found oceans or forests or who knows, right? This would have been an absolute, undeniable win for the Soviets. And that's what kicked off the Venera program, this epic series of 18 missions all designed to conquer Venus.
But here's the thing about trying to travel between planets in the 1960s. It was brutal. Venus was not going to give up its secrets easily. The first few years of the Venera program were just a relentless, soul-crushing string of failures.
The very first probe ever sent to another planet, Venera 1, went completely silent after just 1 week. 4 years later, Venera 2 basically did the same thing. And that doesn't even count what they called the ghost missions, launches that failed so spectacularly that the Soviets just pretended they never happened. They'd say they were just launching heavy satellites. Venus was proving to be a fortress.
Then, in 1967, they finally got a breakthrough. Venera 4 actually made it into the Venusian atmosphere and started sending back data. It was the first probe ever to analyze another planet's atmosphere right there on the spot, and it found out the air was almost all carbon dioxide. But just as the scientists were celebrating, the signal just stopped. They figured out later that the atmospheric pressure was so incredibly immense, way beyond anything they'd imagined, that it had literally crushed the probe like an empty soda can. This was our first big clue that Venus was not a friendly neighbor.
So, the Soviets realized they weren't dealing with Earth's gentle twin. They were fighting a monster. So they had to change their entire strategy. The next phase of the program wasn't about doing elegant science anymore. It was about pure, brute force survival.
Their answer was this thing, Venera 7. To handle the insane pressure that crushed the last probe, this one was built like an absolute tank. It was actually so heavy and over-engineered that they had to strip out most of the scientific gear. Its one and only job was to get to the surface in one piece and prove it could be done.
And it worked. On December 15, 1970, Venera 7 became the first thing made by humans to land on another planet and actually send data back. And the very first piece of information it sent was this number, 465 degrees Celsius. That's over 850 degrees Fahrenheit, literally twice as hot as your kitchen oven on its highest setting. The first piece of a very, very grim puzzle. The second discovery was the pressure. The probe confirmed it was 90 times greater than the pressure we feel here on Earth's surface. Okay, to put that in perspective for you, standing on Venus would feel like being 1 kilometer, or about 2/3 of a mile, deep in the ocean. The weight would instantly pulverize a human being.
And if the scorching heat and the crushing pressure weren't enough, there was the wind. As the probe was falling, scientists on Earth noticed this tiny shift in its radio signal. It's called the Doppler effect. You know how an ambulance siren changes pitch as it drives past you? That's it. By measuring that tiny shift, they calculated that the probe was being violently thrown sideways by constant, hurricane-force winds blowing at 360 kilometers per hour.
Okay, so the Soviets had proved they could survive hell. Now they had to actually see it and hear it. So the next generation of probes were loaded up with cameras and microphones, and this led to some of the greatest wins and one of the most bizarre failures in the entire history of space exploration.
And this is the moment. This grainy, black and white picture from Venera 9 was humanity's very first look at the surface of another world. And what did we see? This desolate, alien landscape just littered with sharp, broken rocks. No oceans, no forests. Just a terrifying, baked wasteland.
But the missions just kept getting more ambitious. Venera 13 gave us our first real sensory experience of Venus. It took the first color photos, and they showed this brownish, rocky ground under a depressing orange sky. It even had a microphone that recorded the first ever sounds from another planet. You could hear the howl of the wind and the distant rumble of what they thought was thunder. It even had a drill and confirmed the ground was a lot like Earth's basalt, which suggested there were probably Venus quakes.
But then came Venera 14, and with it, one of the most facepalm moments in space history. The probe had this spring-loaded arm that was supposed to pop out and measure how hard the ground was. The problem? After landing, one of the camera's lens caps popped off and landed in the exact 1 in a million spot where the arm was supposed to test the soil. So, this multi-million-dollar experiment ended up measuring the hardness of its own plastic lens cap. You just can't make this stuff up.
All right, so after all the triumphs and the unbelievable frustrations of the landers, the final Venera missions took a completely different approach. It was time to step back, get the big picture, and deliver the final verdict on this planet.
So instead of trying any more risky landings, Venera 15 and 16 just stayed in orbit. They were kitted out with these powerful radar systems that could actually pierce right through those thick clouds. For 8 months, they just circled Venus, methodically creating the first, complete, detailed map of its surface. And they revealed these massive mountain ranges and canyons thousands of kilometers long, all hidden from our sight. And this finally brings us back to our original question. Why did they never go back? Well, when you put all the data from all 18 missions together, you get a really clear, undeniable picture. The heat melts electronics in minutes. The pressure crushes anything that isn't built like a deep-sea submarine. The clouds are made of corrosive sulfuric acid. The winds are a constant, violent hurricane, and the ground is just a treacherous field of sharp rocks. It is, quite simply, the most hostile planetary surface in our entire solar system. And for all of that incredible, painstaking, and often heartbreaking work, the Soviets earned this really unique legacy. To this day, Venus is still sometimes called the Soviet planet. A lot of its craters and valleys have Russian names, which is this permanent tribute to the nation that dared to go and touch hell.
The Venera program was just an astonishing feat of engineering and pure grit. It took this mysterious, cloud-covered twin of Earth and turned it into a known, terrifying inferno. The Soviets set out to answer the question of what lies beneath the clouds, and the answer they found was simple: hell. Which really leaves us with just one final thought. Knowing all of that, who would ever dare to return?